Welcome to the Better Everyday podcast. We're unlocking our best self one episode at a time. My name is Grace Garcia, and this is my husband, David Garcia.
What's up, guys?
It's exciting because we've been getting a lot of positive feedback on our last episode.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want to remind you guys to please comment. It just helps, again, with engagement. I feel like when one person sees someone else comment, it's like, oh, I should comment. And then it kind of is a chain reaction and leads to our video getting exposure so we can be a blessing to others. Because at the end of the day, that's what we're doing, to help as many people as we can. And we've been blessed by your guys' comments. So thank you for taking the time. And subscribe if you haven't already. But one of the things about getting better every day that we've been mentioning throughout our podcast is it's not going to be an easy journey. I hope we've gotten that point across. We always say there's two sides of every coin. It's this theme. One side is going to be difficult because society is doing the opposite, or society may look down on it, or it's the harder way, meaning it's going to be delayed gratification. And one is going to be hard because it's going to feel good in the now, but then there might be consequences in the future that you weren't expecting. And so it's like choose your hard. I think we've heard that before, choose your hard. But to get better, you can't get better without challenges.
Mm-hmm.
Life will be full of challenges. And I think our Western civilization, we try as much as possible to get rid of those challenges. And that's kind of what I want to talk about today, like suffering, the fruit that suffering can bear, the purpose of suffering, our experiences with suffering. And so it's a heavy topic. I feel like it's a lot to unpack there. We'll do our best to do this in this episode. But just a reminder, if there's anything that you guys hear or want to know more about, we're an open book. Just ask, and we can make this a 2-part series or 3-part series or whatever it is, because we do talk a lot in this one podcast, but there's just so much more that can be developed.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
With that being said, I kind of wanted to ask you, David,
Mm-hmm.
we always start first with our history and then we kind of dive into there. So whatever you feel comfortable sharing, have you suffered in your life? And if yes, how does that, or what did that look like? And what did you learn from it?
I think suffering is somewhat subjective. I think looking at it in hindsight, depending on who you're asking, you can be like, oh, yeah, like I've suffered so much.
Yeah, that's
but then
true.
compared to somebody else, you haven't suffered at all. Have I gone through hard times? For sure. I think I've gone through some hard times. I've gone through some hard times in my childhood. Gone through some hard times in my young adulthood. And I've gone through some hard times in marriage. Yeah. And do you want to know specifics or
a lesson
a lesson
that you've learned from the suffering? Do you?
I think the biggest hard time that I had was, I've spoken about this in previous episodes. There was a time at home where there was definitely marital problems between my mom and my dad. They were good here and there, but then they were also like pretty bad sometimes. And I remember at 5 years old, like the cops taking my dad away, and that's a memory probably I'll never forget. And I remember telling you that story, and you're like, oh, like 5 years old.
Yeah, at that time my son was 5. Our son was 5. And I feel like that's so young, first of all, to remember anything, but then such a strong memory, I can't even imagine.
Yeah, that was pretty graphic. And then so they were good for a good amount of time, and then they'd, revert back to like some toxic traits and stuff. And so fast forward, I think I was probably around the age of like 20, 21. Um, my father was always somebody who didn't believe in drinking, didn't believe in smoking. Like he used to just, as I was growing up, like, you better never drink. Like if you drink, like you're gonna get it. Or if I ever see you with a smoke, you're gonna get it. Like he definitely deposited fear in my life in regards to that. And I never touched the stuff until I was like 19. But
Which for Canada, like he's Canadian, that's the legal age. Because here in the United States, the drinking age is 21.
yeah,
In
so
Canada, it's 18.
so in Canada it's 18, but where I'm from, Winnipeg, Manitoba, like kids start drinking at like 16.
Yeah.
And so I was in high school getting like invited to parties all the time, and I'd be like, no. And I mean, it's not even that I could go either way, because my parents were pretty like overprotective. Like my parents were the type like, oh, can I go here? Like, no, no, no.
Yeah.
They were the type that they were okay with somebody sleeping over, but never okay with you going out or anything like that, right? So anyways, so he never believed in all that. He instilled that in me, and so that's kind of by what I lived by until I was 19. I kind of fell off and made some bad choices. But the point of the story is, like, in my 20s, my father made a friend, and he wasn't a very good influence. He got him into drinking. At first it started just, couple here and there, and then it became just on Fridays, and then it became on Fridays and Saturdays. And the thing is, it started tapping into some unforgiveness, I think, and some bitterness inside of him, and it started to bring it out. And I don't know if he saw it as like a sort of like relief. It took the edge off or whatever, but it just grew. That it was like a toxic ball, and it just kept growing and growing and growing. Like at first, it was all fun and games, and it was funny, but then he would start saying some things that weren't that great, and then he'd start bringing up some things from the past, and little by little, it started progressing, and then this same friend got him into drugs, and yeah, it was just a bit of a spiral. And again, at first, it was just, oh, it's just a weekend thing, but as problems started to rise, as things started to bubble over, he would get more aggressive. Sometimes it would seem like he would like make up stories. Like it was pretty crazy, and he would get aggressive. He would get violent. I actually remember at the age of 18, I felt like a man, I guess. And I remember him pushing my mom, and they were in their room. Me and my brother were in the living room playing some video games, and I saw him push my mom, and I was like, oh, I'm 18. I'm ready to go. And I went in there and I wrestled with him, and it didn't go that well for me, to be honest. And I remember he kicked me out of the house for a little bit. But that was the least of it. But the point was, like, in my 20s, it got worse and worse and worse. And when I came back home, there was like kind of like an unspoken agreement, like we're not going to cross each other like that. There was sorries given both ways. So there was like some sort of like respect, honor between me and him. And so, but he had it against my mom, and he would be throwing hands. I remember there'd be times where I was downstairs in the basement, and my room was right underneath theirs. And I remember there'd be some times where my mom would be screaming like, David, and my anxiety just, I'll never forget the feeling of anxiety during those moments. Like, you never knew what happened. You couldn't sleep comfortably on the weekends. Like it was rough. And so it was like a couple of years of that. And so somebody could say like that's suffering, and I would see it more of just like, I don't think it's suffering, but it was hard times. Like for my mom, it was probably considered suffering because she was going through it the worst. And my heart went out to my brother because I really wanted to protect him from all that. Like I didn't want him to go through any of that. But honestly, what got me through it was this verse, Romans 8:18, which says, what you're going through right now, the suffering that you're going through right now doesn't compare to the glory that's up ahead of you.
Mm.
And that was hope to me. And I just clinged on to that hope. I didn't know when this whole spiraling was going to finish, but like Monday through Thursday, we were fine. Friday came around and we heard the music pop on and we knew like, oh, it might be a rough one. Or me and my brother used to go to church on Saturdays and we'd come home at night and we'd kind of joke about it, but it was a joke to kind of like take the edge off, but like there was anxiety in both of us. And we're like, do you think when we get home, like we're going to hear the music? And we'd like bet on it. And we'd get close to the door and we hear the mariachi song just blaring. And we're like, oh man. And so it was rough just because when you're in it and that's the only thing you can focus on, you're just like, when is this going to end?
Yeah.
You know? And my mom, I remember she'd be like, I'm praying, I'm fasting. Like, when is this going to end? Like, when is this going to end? And that's rough. You know, like when you feel like you're doing all the right things and you're just like, God, like, help me, rescue me, like, get me out of this.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but I do feel like it was marital issues, it was relationship issues, it was communication issues, it was a lot of things, a lot of pent up like bitterness from the past, like just everything. Just I think my parents never really had great communication. They liked a lot of things, you know, but I guess people always say like, oh, they didn't know any better, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Could they have known better? Of course. But it is what it is. But that time was rough.
Yeah.
That time was rough for sure.
And how, because I feel like, how you said, so many of us go through moments of suffering or go through hard times. And I feel like there's, again, that fork in the road where you can say, my life sucks, dwell on it, kind of dig yourself deeper. Like, this is horrible. When am I going to get out? I'm never going to get out. Life sucks. And then, because in your situation, you're not dwelling on it. Like, at least as your wife, you're not repeating the same cycle.
Mm-hmm.
You never talk about it unless it's like to share your testimony.
Yeah.
You're not like, oh, my dad, well, like a victim mentality. Well, it's because of this, or blaming your upbringing.
Mm-hmm.
If anything, it's completely the opposite, like to empower people. Was that a conscious decision you made? Like, I'm not going to let it affect my future? Do you think it was God's grace? Like, you didn't even realize you were heading to a path of redeeming your story? Like, how did that play out?
I think it's a combination of a couple of things. I remember in my teen years, I did have that victim mentality, and my mom would hear about it, my dad would hear about it, and it would drive him crazy because his thought process was like, I'm loving you the best way I can, which in hindsight, like I always give him credit, like he did his best.
Yeah.
Like I never got the I love yous, I'm proud of you, the hugs, the kisses. Like I didn't get any of that. But the least that I could do is see the effort that he put in, and the way that he would show his love was, I'm busting my butt at work and I'm trying the best to give you and the whole family like the best that I can. You know, like my dad was always proud of himself when he would hear me say like, oh, I want a skateboard. And my mom would be like, that's so expensive. And here he came like a couple of days later, like, here's a skateboard that you wanted, or let's go get the skateboard, you know, like, so he did try, and that was his way of seeing love. And I think that's the part that would anger him a lot, is not being appreciated. And I think that's what it's part of like what made him boil up. It's
Yeah.
like, I'm trying the best that I can. Like, why don't you guys see it? You know? But anyways, in my teens, like I had that victim mentality, like, oh, like my dad doesn't love me. He never tells me that he loves me. I feel like I don't have a dad. until I guess I was praying about it, and we always say like God knows our hearts, and I was serving at church. I remember I just had like this, I guess, special moment with God, and I felt like God embraced me, and it was like, whatever void that you have in regards to your father, like I'm here to fill it. And from that moment on, I feel like things started changing
Mm.
in that regard. Like there was healing starting to happen, and it wasn't necessarily healing towards my father, but healing just within myself of like, okay, like I'm not alone. I do have at least a father in heaven,
Yeah.
and I accepted God as a father in heaven. And so that was one part of it. And the second part is throughout my life, I feel like I don't know why, but I've always seen things happen and be like, I analyze it and I'm like, how can I do this better? And I saw my family, the way that it functioned, and I'm like, how am I going to be better? And again, I remember I used to always just walk around crying, like, my dad doesn't say that he loves me. He doesn't do this, he doesn't do that. And we go back to the whole two sides of every coin. On one side, I could have gone through life, been married, have kids like we do right now, and been like, well, I never got that from my father. So a lot of preachers go, you can't give what you've never received.
Mm-hmm.
And it's debatable. I received it from my heavenly father,
Yeah.
and I think that's the abundance of grace that God bestowed upon me was you may not have received that from your earthly father, but your heavenly father gave you that. And I feel like the moment that I had my kids, I had it in my heart and in my mind, like, I'm going to tell them I love them every single day.
Mm.
And I'm like, I guess when I think about it, it's a combination of that. Like there was healing that happened. I received the love from my heavenly father. And not only that, I was like, I'm going to be better than my father and my mother that came before me,
Yeah.
and I want to just keep pushing the family forward. And I hope that our kids end up being better than us as well.
Mm.
So,
And I think, unfortunately, we're in this fallen world. So to say Christians are not going to experience suffering is not even biblical. Like, we're called to pick up our cross and follow Christ.
mm-hmm.
And Christ lived a life of suffering. And so that we're going to suffer, we're going to suffer. The purpose of suffering, there can be beautiful purpose. It's not like, okay, we're living in this fallen world, and so we're going to suffer, and that's that. God can take what the enemy meant for evil, for us to suffer, for us to be broken, use that suffering to mold us to be more like Christ,
Mm-hmm.
to grow us, to teach us the lesson, to shape our faith. And in that scenario, you decided to go that route. I'm going to cling on to God, and I'm going to be a better version of myself.
Yeah.
Would you have said, if you didn't go through those hard times or those moments of suffering, you wouldn't be a good husband or a good father? I mean, there's no way to know, but what are you thinking in regards to that?
There's like you said, there's no way to know, but I truly believe that when you go through hard times, they're in a way a test.
Mm-hmm.
And not only a test, but they're a way to kind of root your identity of who you are.
Mm-hmm.
You think about somebody who decides like, I'm going to go run a marathon. Like when you start training, that's suffering. Like you're not ready for it. When you
Yeah.
first start to run, you're not ready for 26.2 miles. Like you start running and you're like, I can barely do 3 and I'm hurting. You can call that suffering.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like, okay, when you feel that pain, when you feel the hurt, when your body's telling you stop, when your mind's telling you stop, are you going to stop? Or are you going to continue going forward, believing that you will see that finish line?
Yeah.
And I feel like when you choose to go through some of us have a choice, some of us don't, but like when you go through hard times and you choose to move forward, you're putting out your roots of your identity of who am I? What am I made out of? What has God placed in me? And the sad thing is many people just decide not to push forward and not to find out who they are and who God has called them to be. But yeah, that's what I would say is when you go through hard times, it for me personally, it showed me who I was. Like going through what I went through in my young adulthood, I always carry that with me. And I'm like, if I can go through that, I can go through anything.
Mm.
And like me and you have gone through hard times. And I remember me thinking like, no. Like I've gone through hard times. Like I can make it through whatever it is that me and Grace are going through. Like,
Yeah.
there's, I feel like there's not much. I'm sure there's things that go above what I went through, but I feel like because I went through that said a lot about me, said a lot about my faith. It said a lot about my perseverance. It said a lot about my determination. It said a lot about my resilience. It said a lot about my connection with God. Like I was like, hey, I don't know where this finish line is, but I'm gonna keep going. And it was hard.
Yeah.
It was 100% hard, but I'm glad to say that I crossed the finish line, you know?
Yeah. And yeah, I'm sure our sufferings don't even compare to some, like what, there's horrendous stories out there. Like I don't wish upon anyone.
Yeah.
But I do believe that we have a God where he's always there and he will never let you go something where you can't call on to him. Where you feel like, no, I can't even do this. I can't find a way out. I can't reach God. I can't see him.
Mm-hmm.
I think that'll never happen. You'll always have that moment to reach out to his hand where he will sustain you. Because we've gone through sufferings, but I'm sure I don't even want to, there's like horrors out there.
And the thing is, when you say we'll always have an opportunity to reach out to God and have him be there with us, it's difficult to say that in the moment. It's very difficult to say that in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Because I remember my mom, like, I'm praying, I'm fasting, I'm doing everything possible. I don't feel God. I don't see God.
Yeah.
Where is he? And it's very easy to get caught up in your surroundings and in your situation where you're like, he's absent.
Mm-hmm.
He's not here. And it's really rough because the moment that you start giving up, you lose hope. And then you start just spiraling down. You're like, I don't know what else to do.
Mm-hmm.
And it really comes down to, can you still believe, although the hard times are sticking around? Because it's all about belief. Like,
Faith, yeah.
God is who you believe him to be in your life, like who you allow him to be. Like if you see God as a father, he'll show up as a father.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like if you see him as a savior, he'll show up in your life as a savior. But when the hard times roll, you might start losing faith, and it's rough. I remember my mom actually ended up she stopped going to church for a while.
Mm.
And that was a huge shock to me. I got mad at her. I'm like, you've been the rock of this family in regards to faith for all of my life.
Mm.
And now that rock is saying, I'm done. And that was rough for me. But it was rough, but I got that Salvadorian pride where I'm like, if you're going to quit, I'm going to keep going.
Mm.
And me and my brother kept going, and we kept having faith, and we kept praying. We kept serving to the best of our abilities. And yeah, it was about 3 years of all that.
And that's tough because usually you hear the other way around where the mom is asking the kids to go, or the moms have the faith and they want their faith to be their kids' faith and they're not fully embracing it. But I mean, your mom raised you guys right because you're not only experiencing the turmoil at home, but somehow that faith became yours in the midst of that difficulty, in the midst of the darkness, to the point where even the people who introduced you the faith walk away for a moment and you're still going on strong. Like, I think that takes special determination of like, I'm going to keep going through even though I don't see it anywhere around me.
Yeah. I don't know if this is an oxymoron or like I'm just about to say some blasphemy right now, but I feel like there's times where I've had like holy pride where I'm just like, if you're going to quit, I'm going to keep going.
Yeah.
You know, and that's what I felt in that moment. Like it was tough. It was tough. It was
zeal, holy zeal.
Yeah. But it was just like, I don't know. I always go back to like just physical activity, like being in a race. Just like, I'm going to keep going. I need to see that finish line. Like, I'm not going to quit. There's no way. I don't think I've ever seen myself as a quitter, you know? And so, yeah.
You guys have a powerful testimony. Because, I mean, I know your brother, too. And I think people who meet your brother, you guys don't have, like, a hard heart.
Yeah.
Like, he's super sweet. And I think if people hear that story or if they've gone through it, you'd expect them to be bitter in life or mad or upset. And even your mom is so loving and still serving, asking where she can be of use. And I think what makes it even more beautiful and more difficult is you have a prayer. And that's where faith really comes in. It's like, if I never see it answered in my lifetime, am I still going to have faith? Because you guys haven't seen your dad come back to God. I don't know if in your mind you kind of like, and that's probably something to ask. I've never asked you, like, did you give up hope of your dad going back to God? But like you guys, I feel like released him in a way, okay, you're not going to affect our lives anymore. And I'm sure you still want, he's your dad. Like part of you, there's a prayer, there's desire for him to get to know God. But it's like, God, if you never answer this prayer, you're still a good God. And that takes special faith, knowing like, God, you love us. And you're not here just to answer my every prayer. And I'm not going to love you because you answer every prayer. I'm going to love you regardless, even if I like the situation or I don't.
Yeah, and that's the part that's definitely easier said than done. Like outside the box, you could say that all day long. Inside the box, that's when it gets put to the test, you know? Can I continue to love you when everything around me seems really dark?
Yeah.
Can I continue to serve you even though everything around me seems dark? You know, and I thinking about it, it's pretty strong testimony because, yeah, it was every Saturday me and my brother would go home from church. And sometimes it'd be like a great service at church. And we'd be all fired up. And halfway home, you'd see like our demeanor change. And that's when like the jokes, just to like take the edge off, would come out and like, what do you think it's going to be like at home? And, but for us to continue, and it was partly, we want to continue to have faith. Me and my brother have always been really tight, and we're like, we're going to do this together. And maybe it was partly we're going to church as a distraction as well. Like, let's be honest, like maybe it was part of that. I haven't really thought about it.
But and you had friends there.
We had friends there, yeah. And like I said, like we would go to church Saturday and Sunday, and we'd have good times. Like Sundays was a little rougher when Saturday was rough. And I remember sometimes I'd have to call in and be like, hey, like I'm not gonna make it. Like, you're gonna have to figure something out because we had a rough one last night.
Yeah.
Um, but for us to continue forward, like, there's I think there's a verse. Well, there's a couple of verses in the Bible, but basically it's like the God uses like the lowly, the foolish, what is quote unquote foolish,
Mhm.
like, um, and I think it's in Corinthians. So God uses the foolish to shame the quote unquote wise. God uses the weak to shame the quote unquote strong. And at the end of that passage, it says, it's basically just so the people that got used will have no other choice but to give glory to God.
Mhm.
And looking back at our situation that happened, I'm like, there's no other explanation.
Yeah.
Because you go back to, had it been somebody else, they might have done something crazy, fallen into depression, acted on that depression. Like, there's so many different outcomes, and I'm grateful to God that we made it out.
Yeah. And I'm sure it's, how you said, it's a combination of things like your mom's prayers, you wanting to protect your brother, so you taking him to church, your church community.
Mm-hmm.
That's why church is so important, because you don't know what people are going through, and just the fact that you embrace them, you worship together, kind of like said, distraction, like look at what God is doing, fuel them so that when they go back to their situation, they have enough. But yeah, I think, have you thought about, do you pray for your dad's salvation? Did you give up hope?
I'm going to be honest and transparent. I don't put too much thought into it. With my dad, I think the relationship, the way that it stands, the way that I always tell you that it stands is,
Mm-hmm.
it was really rough when everything ended. Even when I moved over to California, the last thing that he did was he gave me some money, but he gave me some money attached to a letter. And the first sentence that letter said was, "Everything is your fault." And that's the only sentence that I read.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this thing was like, I think it was like a page or two long. That's the only sentence that I read. And I just like, nope, I'm not doing this. And I just ripped it up, threw it away. And so when I moved, we didn't have a good relationship. And then a couple of years after, he reached out and he was like, "Hey, like, I'm sorry for everything that happened. And I want to build a relationship with you. I see that you have a kid." It was just Elijah at the time. "I want to get to know him. I want to build a relationship." And I always had the mentality of, hey, like, if my father wants to have a relationship, I'm down.
Mm-hmm.
There's only one condition. You cannot be talking nothing about my mom. The moment that you do that, and I told him that, the moment that you do that, I'm cutting ties. Like, I'm not doing this all over again.
Mm-hmm.
And so we talked, I think it was a couple emails. And then on like the third or fourth email, he starts, "Your mom this and your mom that." And I'm like, I told you what was going to happen. And so I cut ties with him, but I still have that same stance. Like, if he genuinely wants to have a relationship with me, I'm down to have a relationship.
Yeah.
There's no problem in that. And so that's where everything stands with my father. Like, other than that, I guess, I mean, yeah, I've never really thought about like his salvation or coming back to Christ. He did have a moment when I was young, maybe, I don't remember when it was, maybe 18 or something like that. I remember I gave a word at church and he was there and he came forth and I guess re-accepted Christ in his life.
Mm-hmm.
And that was like a huge moment to me. And he had his like month or so where he was trying to go back to church, and we were all happy, but he fell off again, and everything happened after that. And so, yeah, maybe because I haven't really thought about it, maybe I've lost hope, or maybe I'm like, the ball's in his court. Like,
Maybe you're protecting yourself. You don't, because I'm sure if you think about it, there's pain there.
like on my part,
Yeah. Or like sadness. Like, do you think you don't think about it to kind of protect your feelings?
what do you mean sadness though? Like, what do you think I would be sad about?
Sad at the fact that he's not saved. Like, if he were to die, that's it. He'd be in hell. Like, that doesn't bring you sadness. This is not a funny situation.
You're making me feel like a bad person.
No, it's not. I feel like I didn't even know I was like this, but then that whole Enneagram thing when I was like a 3,
Mm.
and it says that I'm very emotional, but I'm always like, no, I'm not emotional, but it's just like I never uncover the blanket or the rug or whatever.
Yeah.
Because once I do, it's like so many emotions. So for me, like sometimes you ask me like, oh, are you sure you're not going to mind if like this person passes or, you know, this scenario? And I'm like, nah, I'll be fine. I'll be fine. I think I would be, but it's always like if I don't think about it too much. Because once I start like diving in, I think it's kind of like a defense mechanism.
Honestly, I guess there's a reason that we're having this conversation right now. And for the ones that are listening, I had no idea what we were going to talk about until we turned these cameras on, and then she told me.
It was in my court.
Yeah, so I wasn't really prepared for this, but I guess there is a reason for why you brought this up, because I had not really thought about it. And I mean, just like the Bible says, like, if you're ignorant of it, like, okay. But once you know about it, it's like now you can't ignore it.
Yeah.
And now I feel like responsible to pray for that. And I will be praying for that.
I'll be praying too. I mean, I've never prayed for his salvation, but he's the grandpa to my kids. And I always tell you, like, oh, you're not curious. He's not curious to see how his grandkids look, how they are. Like, they're amazing children. But I think the point of the suffering is if he doesn't, God is still good. God is still answering prayers. And I'm like, how do I say it's not crying, but it's inevitable. I don't know the man you would be without having gone through that, but just knowing like your story and how you've gone through that, the love you have for our kids, there isn't a day that goes by that you don't say the words, you don't show them like by giving hugs, kisses, cuddling them even if they don't want to, by providing for them, by loving me, even just the fact that you love me and I feel loved and our marriage is growing. And like you didn't have that, you had no model of it. And I'm just so proud of us because we're only 8 years married, but I feel like, yes, the beginning was rough, but it propelled us to where we needed to be. And I'm like, if now in this season our love looks like this and your love to our kids look like this in the future, I can't even imagine like how good our marriage is going to be. And so I do think that suffering was not in vain. I think it made you the man that you are today, the father that you are today. And I think that's the beauty of suffering with Christ, because he will not make it just be in vain, and he'll be faithful, make you stronger, make it where you bear fruit. How he said it's like gold going through fire, refining moments, realizing what things need to go away because it's not helpful or it's not okay, and then for your true self to come out. And so I don't want to say I'm grateful for you going through that, but I'm just in awe of you going through that and coming out.
Yeah.
Like this.
It's a testimony. It's all thanks to God. Like, we always talk about this, like two people can go through the same thing but choose different paths,
Mm.
and it's by the grace of God that I'm able to be sitting here with you,
Yeah.
knowing that we have two kids that are fast asleep that we love so much, and we're doing the best that we can, and I feel like we're living a blessed life for sure. And yeah, I'm super grateful to God. I think that's why I always feel like I always have a special connection to God, especially in worship. Because for me, worship is a time of gratitude, a time for you to pour out to Him, like, thank you, and I'm just like, everything that you've carried me through, how could I not give thanks?
Mm.
I'm like, I don't know why I always go back to it, but crossing that finish line, making it through, continue moving forward, like knowing that He's always got my back, knowing that He's always with me. Like, if I can make it through what I made through before, I know I can make it through anything. Like,
Mm-hmm.
Him giving me identity, Him filling any voids, Him always just giving me opportunities to learn and grow. Like, we talked about it in the last episode. Like, things shifted in my life when I was a young kid, and definitely hardened my heart. Had attitude change, became a jerk. Like, I carried that into adulthood. I carried that into marriage, and now, like, little by little, like, all that hardness has been being chipped away.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember at the beginning of our marriage, like, I didn't love you properly, and now I feel like I truly feel in love with you, and I love our kids, and I'm so grateful to be able to pour out that love, and it's a soft-hearted love. It's not a forced love. And yeah, a lot of people in my shoes could have been like, I'm just going to repeat the cycle again.
Mm.
But I'm grateful to God that we're here.
And what's even more amazing is with the lack of healthy men in your life, with the lack of that fatherly love, those good examples of what a healthy man looks like. I think it's so amazing how God is like, okay, you don't, not that you didn't need that, because I feel like it's so important to have that figure,
Mm-hmm.
but how He became that for you. And now you're leading other men. And I think anyone in your life could have been like, David, no, well, look at his situation at home. Like, who is he to speak into men, give men identity? But I think how you said, like, God uses what society would be like, no, to show His glory.
Mm-hmm.
And just the stories of people who are like, he's so wise, or the impact he gave to me, the empowering, knowing that I can move forward. And I know this is just the beginning. Even with the podcast was like your idea. And that's impressive of what can come from a situation where you just hand it to God. Like, God, in my hands, this is the end. This is all I see. But in your hands, you can take it to bless more. That's what we've been talking about, how we desire to be blessed, not just for our family, because we said our family is seeing the fruit of that, but now you're expanding it to blessing more men. And I'm sure those men are going to take what you have deposited into them and take it to their families.
Yeah, and like you said, I'm really grateful for everything that I've gone through. And in the same way where I could say I never received those words of affirmation from my father, but I can just pour them out onto my kids, is the same way where I'm like, I had to go the long way to learn all this.
Mm.
And it's such a privilege and an honor to be able to speak to other men and help them fast track, as long as they choose to fast track, right?
Yeah.
But, and I always will go back to, like, if I had to go the long road to be able to help somebody get from point A to point B in a faster way, in a wiser way, for them to not exactly have to go through that hard of situations,
Mm-hmm.
for them to be able to take the knowledge, take the wisdom, and be like, okay, um, thank you, first of all, God, and thank you, David, for imparting this, because now I can go through life in a wiser way, and just like it's worth it, you know. Yeah, like you said, it would have been much easier if I had mentors around me. It would have been much easier if I had those men that I could be like, okay, like you're gonna be my role model or whatever, right? Um, but I had to go the long way, and I think there's some people that are cut out to go through the long way,
Mm-hmm.
because there's some men that are like, well, nobody ever taught me, so I'm not gonna do nothing. And then there's other men that are like, nobody ever taught me, but I'm still gonna learn.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's through trial and error, whether it's through research, whether it's through asking people, like, I will learn because I want to see a better tomorrow. And I guess I was chosen to be one of those people that went the longer way. But again, I'm grateful for it, because even though it was longer, even though I went through hard times, even though it was trial and error, even though I had to exercise more faith, like, it was harder, it was longer, but that harder and longer gave me even more identity.
Mm-hmm.
And it allowed me to stand on firm ground. And it allows me to have confidence right now, where I'm not easily shaken. I'm not easily swayed. I'm not easily influenced. Like I know what I'm made out of.
Yeah.
I know what God has carried me through. I know all the wisdom that I've gained. Like, there's not much that could shake me, and I'm really happy and grateful for that, because there's a lot of people, especially in today's society, that lack that identity,
Mm-hmm.
and they're so easily influenced, and they're so easily shaken, and they're so easily moved, and like, but I'm just like, thank you, God, because my roots are in you, and there's not much that can uproot me.
Yeah. I love that. And I just love being a witness to it and seeing. I get like front row seat. And I know your brother is following in your footsteps, and your grandkids, your kids and your grandkids, like, you guys completely changed. And that's the importance that we're trying to get, that your decision today might be hard, but we said it, I don't even remember what episode it was, early on. Like, don't take the easy way out, because the easy way out is always selfish.
Mm-hmm.
And when you decide to go the long route, the one that's not easily not popular, it's not traveled by, that's where your decision is no longer selfish, but it's life-giving.
Yeah.
And you guys changed completely the Garcia name. And now, well, like, our kids are proud, like, Araya Garcia, Elijah Garcia.
Yeah.
And I don't know how you hear your last name and you're like, wow.
I'm proud of it.
Mm.
I'm proud of it. And I think what was it, like a year ago or something, like I decided, like, our motto for our family is going to be, we always try our best.
Mm.
That's what we always tell Elijah, like,
Yeah.
when he's doing anything. And I say Elijah because he's older, he understands more. Like, I'm sure we'll tell the same thing to Araya, but like, and we even say it to ourselves, each other, like,
Mm-hmm.
we Garcias try our best.
Yeah.
We just give it our all. That's what we're made out of.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm proud of Elijah, because, yeah, he always gives it his all.
Yeah, that little kid. It surprises me.
And again, it goes back to just being grateful to God, like to change the whole like generation. And everyone says like generational curses and stuff, like, but just to change the meaning of the name,
Yeah.
just to change the trajectory of our family.
Mm. And I've heard people, and I'm not saying I'm against this or whatever, but I've heard people who change their name because of the connotation or of who it belonged to,
Mm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
They're like, I don't want to be associated with this. This person was known for this. And I completely get that. But to redeem your name, like what you did, not be ashamed of it, not say, I wish I had it other way, not say, like, oh, this name holds so much negative things, I'm going to just walk away from it. But instead embrace it, and now you redeemed it to mean now something completely different. I think that's powerful too.
To see better days, it takes hard work. It takes a lot of hard work. It takes a lot of mental effort. It takes a lot of spiritual effort. It takes a lot of faith. It's not easy, but that at the end is rewarding.
Mm.
Like right now, I truly, like when I reflect on our family, I'm living out what I always prayed for. I don't know why. Maybe it was the daddy issues or whatever, but I always wanted to get married young. I always wanted to have kids. And I just always pictured, like, I guess you could call it like feminine, because I only hear like
No,
girls
that's not
ever
feminine.
talk about it. But I,
You're made for me.
I just always thought, like, when I have my family, I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
be so happy. I'm going to have a wife that I love with all my heart. She's going to love me back. I'm going to have kids that I play with and I just spend time with them, make memories, and I'm going to be a great leader to them and a great coach and a great father. Like, I just always picture that. And now, after all the years, I'm looking at it and I'm like, this is what I prayed for, and it's easy to say it right now, right?
Yeah.
But in the years prior, like, it was hard. It was hard. And I mean, I've said it in a different episode and I'll say it again. Like, um, I guess the verse that I always go back to in regards to like my situation from back then and to now is like Psalms 23:5. Prepare a table before you in the presence of your enemies. Your cup overflows. And the anointing oil pours out on me. And like, I just always go back to like, yeah, like when you're going through hard times, so you have a choice. There's two choices. Whether you believe it or not is up to you. But that there's two choices, they're two choices. You can focus on the bad or you can focus on the good. That there is good, there is good. And it's all about the focus. And I remember telling you like an analogy of like, when we look at the bad, it's almost like looking at it in a microscope. Something so small, but when we look at it in a microscope, it seems so big. And I remember telling you, like, take your head away from the microscope and look at the bigger picture. And I think that's something that needs to be practiced of like, your mind plays games on you. Your eyes play games on you. Your heart plays games on you. Like, and you just have to like whip it all into shape and just be like, focus on the good, that there is good, there is good. It's not easy, but no great things are easy. But for you to choose in the same way that, we choose to love each other, like you choose what you want to focus on and you choose if you're going to believe or not. You choose whether you're going to have faith or not. You choose if you're going to cross that finish line or not. It's a choice.
Yeah.
It is a choice. Many people who want to use it as an excuse, like, no, I didn't have a choice. My situation was just too bad. Like, no, you have a choice. You 100% have a choice in every single situation, every single circumstance. You have a choice. And
good.
a lot of times you have to choose the harder way to see the better days.
Yeah. And I think another reason why we share is it's so easy to, whether people know us or not, but like look at us and be like, oh, they look so in love. Look at their family of 4, like, and want that. And then when tough times come, like complain, I don't have that, I don't have that, not knowing the backstory.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's nice sharing your heart out, because now when they get through moments, it kind of reminds them, okay, they were in the same situation as me or a similar situation. And if I want to have that, I have to make sure I choose to focus on the good. I choose to cling to God, because it's rare for people to be like, oh, this is the ugly part of my life. And we always see the good and we want that, not knowing what it took. And so we're not prepared when we face those tough times,
Mm-hmm.
because we just want the good.
Yeah, and it's especially difficult right now that we're living in the social media era, where all you see is the good. Like nobody posts the bad, everybody posts the good, and everyone goes, "I want that." But again, like you said, like you don't know what they went through to get there.
Oh, yeah.
You don't know what they
For sure.
sacrificed. You don't know all the hard times that they went through. You don't know how bad they tried their hardest. You don't know how bad they gave it their all. Like you don't know how much blood, sweat, and tears that they went through. Like you have no idea. And that's why I always go back to, like, it's about building character. If
Yeah.
you do not have the character, then you have no business wanting whatever it is that you want, like some sort of success or like whatever, money. If you don't have the character, and the only way to build the character is going through hard times. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
For the listeners that don't like that, like, I'm sorry. That is the only way to build character. You cannot build character the easy way. The only type of character that you're going to have in the easy way is, I'm sorry, but probably being lazy, being weak, always running away. You're not going to build any sort of good character picking the easy way out.
100%. And well, that's why I wanted to share your story today. I love your testimony. I love it. I'm always like, my husband. But you have such a powerful testimony. And when you've shared it, people come, I'm sure there's so many people who can relate to that. Not having perfect parents, but not even just that scenario, just with the fact of not having an easy childhood, whatever that looks like. And so we hope that it motivated you guys to keep moving forward, because that's what this podcast is. Better every day. See, I challenge you, when difficulties come your way, even just this week, choose to zoom out and say, God, I am so grateful for this, 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 this. Maybe you can only think of 1 or 2, but you'll see that slowly. It's kind of like a domino effect. You think of 1 thing, 2 things, even if those things to think of was so difficult, and then you'll just start thinking of more and more, and then see his goodness. And that, seeing God's goodness, is what's going to sustain you till the end. And yeah, I love you.
I love you too.
Thank you for sharing your story.
Thank you for asking me about it.
Of course. And thank you guys for watching. Again, please reach out for any questions. He's an open book, whether it's about this story or anything else you guys are curious about. I am looking forward to where this podcast takes us and your guys' testimonies. It's been so humbling hearing how us choosing to do this has been impacting you. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Until the next one. Bye.
See ya.